Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the May meeting of the Borough Council's Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Geary, and as the former Mayor of Christchurch, I will open the meeting. Members and officers have their names in front of them for the ease of reference. In order to assist in the process this evening, I must ask everyone to ensure that their mobile phones are either switched off or on silent mode. We'd be grateful if you would remain quiet whilst the meeting is in progress. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be filmed by the Council and broadcast live in the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the chamber, it is possible that the cameras will capture your image. By your presence, you are deemed to consent to film and for those purposes. If you address the committee, your contribution will be recorded unless this is during the period when the meeting is in private session as permitted by the access of information provisions. The chairman of the meeting can, and at the discretion, terminate or suspend the filming if, in their opinion, continue to do so would prejudice the proceedings of the meeting, or they consider that the continued filming might infringe on their rights of any individual or breach any statutory provision. The first item on the agenda is to elect the election of the chairman. Do I have a proposal?
Yes, I'd like to propose Councillor Liesl Smith for the post of chairman.
And that's seconded. Those in favour? I'm afraid you've got the job, Liesl.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I will take a few moments to explain the process that we work to in these committees. Each application will be presented by the appropriate case officer. After each presentation, those members of the public who have written to the council requesting to speak will be invited to take the seat at the opposite end of the table. Time allocation is 3 minutes for each speaker. This will be strictly timed and enforced. The green light displayed on the front of the timer will change to amber when there is 30 seconds remaining, then change to red at the end of 3 minutes. Speeches must relate to material planning issues and must not be derogatory. No questioning is allowed and no further written information, photographs, plans or other material can be submitted at this stage. Those applications on the agenda with public speakers will be dealt with first, so the running order for this evening is as the agenda. I hope this is clear. If there are any questions, please speak to the officers, me or the Vice Chairman after the meeting. If the meeting extends beyond 9 p.m, I will ask for a proposal from the members to extend the meeting to a specific time. Once the item under discussion at that time is resolved, the meeting will then be adjourned and will reconvene on another evening. There are no planned fire practices this evening, so if the alarm does sound, we have a fire exit at the far end of that way or back through the way you came. Just follow one of the members, they know where they're going. We now move back to the agenda, and the second item is to elect a vice chairman, and I would like to propose Councillor Tavis Fox. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Congratulations. We'll just go on to apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, I have apologies from Councillor Bath.
Thank you. And on to declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Lofts.
Thank you, Chairman. I live in Clare Court, which is next door to 61 Wortley Road. I used to live in 55, and that was where I lived for the majority of my time on this council. I consider the fact that I have lived in that neck of the woods for so long and am still living there that I should state an interest and leave during that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loss. So that's item 6B. So, yeah, item 6B. Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? In that case, we'll go on with the agenda, looking at the minutes for the previous meeting. Do I have any comments on those?
Just a typo in minute number 328. It should say 15th of February 2018, not 15th of March. Same meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a proposer for the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Neer. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hall. Everybody happy with the minutes? Show of hands. Yep. In that case, we shall move on with the agenda, and we're looking at agenda item 6A. Who's leading on this, please? Can I just introduce David Hodges to everybody? I'm not sure everybody would have met him before.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm David Hodges, and my grand title is Development Management Team Leader, with responsibility for the Christchurch team. So you'll be seeing a lot more of me in future. To move on to the first item, this is an application for the redevelopment of this site on Lymington Road. Members who served on the committee before will be familiar with the site, as you've previously approved a scheme for its redevelopment before. You'll see the red line site there, with the northern part fronting onto Lymington Road and extending back to the rear of the property on Wortley Road. So here's your aerial view. That shows you that the site's currently occupied by buildings fronting the main Lymington Road, with car parking surrounding. You'll see some of the existing tree cover on the surrounding boundaries, which is also referred to in your report. The site lies in an area designated as primary retail shopping frontage in your adopted local plan, and just for your benefit, we've identified the area of the secondary shopping frontage further to the east. These are surveys of the existing buildings on the site, and as I described at the start of the presentation, there's already a planning permission for the site. It includes development of 4 houses as part of that, this terrace of 3 units and a further detached unit that you're about to see. These designs are unchanged from the existing permission, so we're already committed to these designs on this particular site, and in the same location. And here's the other detached house, so as again, this appears as part of the existing approval. This is the proposed layout. The layout is only marginally different from the approved layout. I'll show you the changes in a minute. But in effect, what you can see are the main proposals for 2 blocks fronting the Lymington Road with an access in the middle, with retail and flexible uses on the ground floor proposed and the residential uses above. And then at the south of the site, the proposed houses. The remainder of the site is given over to soft landscaping and car parking, with the bin and cycle stores that you can see on that layout. This is just to show you the differences in layout between the two. They're largely the same. The main differences are in the what would be the southwest corner, bottom left, where you would have slightly less soft landscaping to accommodate the additional car parking as part of this scheme to serve the increased number of units proposed. Oh, excellent, thank you. help me to point. So this is the proposed elevations as viewed from the Livington Road. This is the main street scene, and you'll see how the development steps up into the centre of the site with the central axis in between here. On this plan, what we're showing you is the difference in the increase in scale. So the blue line that James helpfully pointing to there, that's the outline of the existing approval, and then above that is the increased height of the building to accommodate the additional units that are proposed in this particular scheme. And you can see that relates mainly to the centre of the buildings, but also includes additional height on the far ends. Similarly with block B, which is the other block, slightly smaller block, this one, but again you can see how the increase in bulk is to the centre of the site to accommodate the additional flats that are proposed with this scheme. This is to give you a comparison between the two schemes, Chair. You have, in effect, the existing approval, which was more of a overtly 2.5 storey scheme with accommodation in the roof space here, and then the more overtly 3 to 4 storey proposal that you've got with the current scheme. And from our point of view, this is the nub of the issue before members today, is the difference between the increased scale of the buildings and their design and the impacts that that may have. In terms of the schedule of materials, this is similar to as before with the, as you see listed on there. This is just the elevations that you've seen in greater detail compared against the approved scheme shown here. And again with block B, what you're considering now against the existing approval. This is your floor plan. The main difference with the scheme in relation to here is the proposal to turn this from 3 individual units to a single unit, and also the applicant seeking a flexible permission in this case for A1 retail, A2 financial professional services, and A3 cafe use in this larger unit. Here's your layout further up, so you can see the flats arranged on the various floors and up to the 3rd floor level in the higher part of the building in the centre of the site. So taking you to some views, this is the view in effect with your back to the site with the new development under construction opposite. The view 2 is from an existing block of flats which has a view into the site from the southeastern end. Southwestern end. This is view 3, is looking towards a more modern block that's been built just beyond the car park along the boundary of the site in views 3 and 4. And then this is on the far end of the site where you can see the existing buildings which project back from the Livington Road and the large area of hard standing and garages. And view 3 shows you the rear boundary towards Wortley Road. Okay. So, Chair, returning back to the differences between the existing and proposed schemes, you'll see from the report we've outlined the changes between the proposed development. The council is committed to the scheme at the bottom of the slide, and that has an approval and can be implemented at any time by the applicants. So what we are considering is the difference between this scheme and the proposed scheme above. You'll see from the report we've given due consideration to the impacts that may have in terms of the street scene and also on neighbours' living conditions. In this particular instance, we're satisfied that the scheme continues to comply with the relevant development management policies in your local plan and recommend the application for approval accordingly. Just as a note on the update sheet, you'll see from the recommendation that the recommendation is to delegate to the head of planning to approve subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement, and in particular that Section 106 agreement is concerned with inserting an overage clause so that if there is a delay in the implementation of the scheme, that the applicants will submit to us a further viability assessment. We've accepted, following the advice from our viability assessors, that in this particular instance the scheme isn't sufficiently viable to deliver the affordable housing, but if there is a delay in implementing the scheme, we have inserted a clause into the legal agreement so we can revisit that. The applicant's agreeable to the wording of that, and we're just simply waiting for the niceties of completing the agreement on both sides. Once that is done, we'd be able to issue the permission. So, Chair, the recommendation is as on the report, to delegate to the Head of Planning to approve, subject to completion of that agreement and the conditions listed in the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker on this item, Mr. Bennett. If you'd like to come forward, take a moment to introduce yourself and then we'll start the clock.
Lovely, yeah. My name's Adam Bennett, Town Planning Consultant at Ken Park Planning Consultants, and I represent the applicant in this particular matter. Okay, so the scheme before you today is the result of positive and proactive negotiations between the applicant and officers, with all of the issues here having been resolved at an early stage. The application itself has been in a position now where officers have been happy with it for some time, but obviously there's been considerable negotiation in respect to the Section 106 agreement, which has delayed this coming before you. The recommendation before you now is to approve, subject to completion of the 106 agreement, which I support. Members will recall approving the previous application for this site at committee in December 2016. The development now proposed is a subtle revision of this earlier scheme, which increases the number of flatted units to 27 from the approved 23. The commercial units at ground floor remain, however, 3 of those smaller units have been combined into one larger flexible unit. The dwellings at the rear of the site, as Mr. Hodges pointed out, remain exactly the same as per the approved scheme. To accommodate the additional flatted units, there is a modest increase in the height of both of the street fronting blocks to 4 stories. This, however, steps down to 3 stories at both ends of the site, where it abuts 259 and 277 Lymington Road respectively. Now, to provide for this additional increase in the number of flats, the on-site parking provision has also increased to 33 spaces from 30, which both your officers and Dorset County Council have confirmed is more than acceptable to meet the needs of this development. Whilst the proposals here result in some additional massing within the street scene compared with the earlier approval, the same design ethos remains. The buildings step up towards the centre of the site, providing a greater vertical emphasis and reducing any sense of horizontal dominance which results from the general width of these buildings. Now, the increase in roof height to accommodate the additional storey is modest itself, which also helps to mitigate this presence. We consider the scheme to be a visual improvement to the earlier approval, and the development still represents a very high quality addition to the street scene in replacement of the existing rather banal buildings on the site. Your officers completely agree with this sentiment. There's no change in the separation distances from the neighbouring properties resulting from the additional massing, and the limited number of additional window openings proposed are not considered to give rise to any loss of privacy or harm, as officers have confirmed. There are also no objections or concerns raised by consultees on any of the technical matters here. The scheme will deliver much needed new housing in a sustainable location and new commercial units which will enhance vitality and viability of the district centre in a high quality, well considered development. We ask therefore you vote in accordance with the recommendation of your officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. We will now go to questions. Who would like to start? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one really on the parking provision. It does seem that with the number of flats and visitors to the flats, are you happy that we've got enough parking spaces?
Yes, Chair. We've considered that against the criteria in the adopted Dorset parking guidelines, and also taken advice from the Highways Authority. And we'd also recognise that this is a very convenient and sustainable location in the middle of Highcliffe. And in the absence of any concerns raised by the Highways Authority, we would recommend that that parking level is acceptable, Chair.
Councillor Spittle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I see actually that we're now, the new scheme is proposing 4 stories, including the ground floor, whereas it was my memory that I thought we only had 3 stories limit. Could you explain, how the 4th story is being recommended?
Chair, it's important to consider these applications on their merits and whether the impacts of the increased height are compatible with that broader street scene along the Lymington Road. So we've given due thought to that, and we don't have a policy which rules that out. So we have to consider that on its merits. And what we've done is looked at that comparison between the actual overall increase in height, which is fairly limited when you look at the 2 comparisons together. The other issue is that 4th story is mostly within the roof space, so it's largely within this area here. So it reads as a 3 to 3.5 story scale. And we've looked at that within the context of the quite tall buildings that you've got surrounding that. We don't feel that that's so out of keeping, so out of character that it's detrimental or harmful to the street scene on Lymington Road, Chair.
If I could just add to that, with the National Planning Policy Framework at paragraph 58, also advises that we need to optimise the potential of the site to accommodate development. And in terms of any concerns that members may have about how this fits in the street scene, paragraph 65 states that local planning authorities should not refuse planning permission for buildings which promote high levels of sustainability because of concerns about incompatibility with an existing townscape if those concerns have been mitigated by good design. So there is support for a building of this type which officers have assessed as being acceptable in this location.
Did you want to come back on that?
Yes. Thank you for that information. Whilst I accept what you're saying, are you then saying that there are other properties in the high street that are of a similar height? Or is this only going to be the first? So is it going to be setting a precedent?
I think there's 2 parts of that. The first, in terms of the precedent, each time you get a proposal, you need to consider that on its merits. And when you consider the heights and scales of the buildings either side that you can see there, what you're getting is a gradual step up in the scale of those buildings there. And we don't feel that that's so out of keeping, so harmful that warrants refusal of the whole scheme. If you get a proposal elsewhere for a 3 to 4 story scale development, you'll need to look at that in its context and on its merits. But ultimately, the approval of this isn't the first step to it seeing everywhere along that particular stretch. It's the wide frontage of that site allows some scope to go up in height, we feel, in this particular instance.
Sorry to dominate the scene. So, bearing in mind what you have said, is it possible then to have a condition that the additional elevation, which I notice is 2 metres or equivalent to possibly 6.5 feet, is it possible just to have a condition that it would only apply to the high street as opposed to other places within the area? Because I know there's always been a large amount of concern about retaining just the 3-story limit. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I don't think we can do that. Every application has to be looked at on its own merit, and therefore anything else that came before us with 4 stories, we would be able to make the decision as and when that came before us. We have no policy stating how many stories we will have in that area, and therefore there is nothing to back up that condition. Councillor Nottage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I thank you for the update sheet as well? I noticed this is by way of a question, really, for future, the viability assessment has shown that the development of the site cannot support contribution to provision of affordable housing. I think that at some time or other, the planning committee should know a little bit more about the assessments that are that contribute to those decisions. I know that's been verified and agreed by the district valuer, but for my part, I'd just like to know a little bit more about what does and what does not contribute to affordable housing, etc. I also note that the condition that the applicant has agreed that if the construction doesn't reach a shell and core stage within 2 years of the date, that viability report can be reassessed. I'm right by saying that most of the left-hand side of this building is under construction as we speak. No, it isn't.
I think you're thinking of the construction on the other side of the road, which is not dissimilar design.
This is too. Oh, I see. I apologise. But so I withdraw my question.
Chair, yes, so the question about viability, we set out in some detail in the report the discussions about viability. Our understanding is the government is, as part of the proposals of changes to the NPPF and the government white paper, they're looking at establishing some principles for the publicity of information in relation to viability assessments and how they should be carried out. So we're waiting in the summer for the government to publish those, when they're actually going to set out on a very clear footing how they should be considered, the information that council should publish, and in effect establish a clear procedure for dealing with those matters. For the purposes of this particular information, we receive a report from the developer which states that they're concerned about the viability of the scheme. We give that to the district valuer as in effect an independent assessment, so that we've got an independent view of the veracity of the information that we're being given. So we're satisfied with the information we get from the DV as a reliable interrogation of that case by the applicant, and such that we have confidence in it, and we can say to you we have confidence in the DV's assessment. So if the district valuer is saying to us there isn't a case to argue over the viability, we would relay that to you as our position and recommend that you had confidence in that assessment from the DV as well. In terms of the information that is submitted, whether the being allowed to view that will be dependent on whether there's any commercially sensitive information within that submission.
Does that help?
Well, thank you for that. I suppose really the question I would ask you is just how far would you go in allowing us to understand the principle of affordable housing, which is quite crucial to our plans as far as the council is concerned?
Yeah, Chair. I mean, we've got a policy. We're trying to deliver affordable housing as part of that policy, and we don't give up that easily. But we are constrained by the way that the system is set up currently, where if the applicant puts forward the necessary information that is accepted by our independent assessor to show that the scheme isn't viable, we don't have much ground to then resist the scheme because it doesn't provide affordable housing, because in effect we'd be fighting an appeal case that we couldn't win. So we don't want to do that. What's important to us is to interrogate those developments to find out whether they are sufficiently viable to deliver affordable housing. Some will, and unfortunately some won't, as the system is set up currently. This is one of the ones in which, after the district valuers looked at all those informations in relation to the cost of the development, the likely return to a reasonable investor, the likely sale values and rental values of the commercial unit, their conclusion in this particular instance is it's not sufficiently viable. We don't want to be in that position each time, but if that's presented to us as a fact, then that's accepted by the independent assessor, then we would have to accept that as overwhelming evidence that in this particular instance it can't provide affordable housing.
Did you want to come in?
Oh, apologies, yes, just to add in terms of what the policy states. So the policy states at LN3, so any planning application which on financial viability grounds proposes a lower level of affordable housing than is required by the policy percentage requirements, which is 40%, must be accompanied by a clear and robust evidence that will be subject to verification. So they've given us the robust evidence. We've gone to the verification by using the district valuer. In this instance, it's a case that complies with that policy still because we've tested whether it's sufficiently viable or not.
I hope that makes sense. I have a question. The larger retail unit, is there an end user for that at the moment? Because it is quite a large unit.
We've not been advised of that. That's not our role as the planning authority to say either way who should go in there. What we're doing is considering it in the wider scope of the vitality and viability of the high street there, in terms of whether allowing that A1, A2 or A3 use would then contribute to the vitality and viability of the high street of Lymington Road at that point. So that's our concern. We've not been advised of an end user.
Councillor Hall.
Very much, Madam Chairman. I think Councillor Notch has made a very valuable point, and I'd like to. It's all very well saying we need affordable housing, but also there's a lot of difference between the social housing and affordable. And affordable, I understand, is only 80%, or it's 80% of the market value, which, in my opinion, is very high. Would you agree with that?
We can't really agree with it because affordable housing is just an alternative term for social housing. So the split that we have is between socially rented and shared ownership. You're right about the discounted values, but I don't think this is a place to get into the values of those. We have a policy which, if affordable housing was applicable on this site, we would be applying and we would be reporting to you how the offer sat against our policy requirements. But affordable and social housing is the same thing.
Any further questions? Councillor Neal.
Yes, 7.6. The trees. There's a contradiction in some of the comments there about the benefit of the screening to the flats behind. I don't see in the conditions that you've actually put condition in about replanting any of the trees that you remove.
Chair, bear with me 1 second. So at condition... Chair, that's correct. And if members were sufficiently concerned about that, we would be content to add a landscaping scheme just to ensure the quality of the scheme reflected the layout that you see before you on the screen.
I think if you follow it down 7 or 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 points T1, T5, you carry on saying there's a negative impact to the flats behind, so I would like some screening put in as a condition.
I think at condition number 11, actually, it talks about protecting the trees and their rooting environments once groundwork starts, so maybe we could look at extending that to cover all of the landscape. Any further questions? Councillor Spittle.
I'm sorry to come back about the height again. Well, I'm not really, but I was just apologising to appear nice. And I see on one of the conditions, number 15, that you have referred to general permitted development order. But as I read it, that only seems to be related to retail use. Am I right? Or does it also mean that permitted development rights are going to be removed for the development of the properties that will be inhabited, not the commercial use?
Chair, yes, if I can help explain. Condition 15 is only concerned with the use of the retail unit. The reason for condition 15 is we want to retain those uses in A1 retail. Under the permitted development regulations, they can be changed to other A uses without needing planning permission. So we want to retain the retail benefit. There isn't any further conditions relating to removal of PD rights because these are flats and they don't benefit from any PD rights. So in effect, they can't extend or insert any further windows into the block. In terms of the houses at the back, you could consider that, but those, if I just go to the layout quickly, I don't think there would be an overriding reason to remove the permitted development rights for these houses due to the fact that they've got reasonable grounds and gardens and areas, and particularly we don't necessarily want to be dealing with applications for sheds at these properties when they could just put them up as permitted development. And also our experiences of finding inspectors of taking a very sort of dim view of us uniformly removing permitted development rights where there isn't an overriding need to do so. So the flats here can't alter without coming back to us. And we've considered that actually about whether we should restrict those rights to add outbuildings or alterations, but we feel in this particular instance there's not an overriding reason to remove their PD rights, Chair.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Spittle?
No. Could we see, please, the plans for the houses, just to satisfy myself how many? So they're only going to be two. Yeah, no. In fact, that satisfies me. Actually, I was afraid they were going to be of the same height as the shops and the frontage. Thank you. And I should have referred that, or I should have looked at that a little bit more closely. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions before we go into debate? In that case, we shall go into debate. And who would like to start me off? Vice Chairman?
Thank you, too kind. Okay, as the design champion hat comes with the job of Vice Chairman, I just want to say that I do remember the previous development coming through to us, and I remember thinking that I quite liked the design, and I have to say that I find the new design to be not quite so appealing. However, that said, we don't have any reasons that I can see that we could turn this down. So I'm happy to propose as set out with the recommendation there to extend condition 11 to include the screening. Okay.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Grace.
I'm happy to second this. I also agree with Councillor Fox about I prefer the first design of these buildings, but as we have no planning reasons to refuse, I will second.
Do we have any further debate? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, unfortunately, I can't support this because I think it is overdevelopment. I think the height, the bulk, despite what the officer says, I do think it will set a precedent. It's a very narrow high street. It's going to alter the character of Leamington Road altogether. On the previous application, I didn't like those two big belvederes. They've gone, which is, I think, is an improvement. But I do feel that we are setting a precedent for the rest of Highcliffe. So, unfortunately, Madam Chairman, I will not be able to support this application.
Councillor Spittle.
Thank you. It'll come as no surprise that I'm unhappy about the application. Simply, as the previous speaker has said, it is the height and the bulk, and it's not such an appealing architectural designed property as we saw before. So I cannot support it.
Do I have any further speakers in the debate? Councillor Nottage.
I sympathise with the points that's just been made by the two councillors. However, without shadow of doubt, one of the issues that we have as far as our high streets, which are changing so fast in front of our eyes, is the fact that we do need population in them. And whilst I have got considerable reserve about the change in design, especially the presentation of the new large shop, I will support it because I feel that there's every consideration that that increase in population and those flats are going to be very valuable to that part of the high street. Thank you.
Any further comments? In that case, we will go to the votes. All those in favour of approving with the amended condition 11. I'm afraid you can't speak on that.
Yes, Chair, if I can just clarify the point that the applicant was trying to make. What the applicant was concerned with is the trees which are being protected, as you can see on this plan, are outside of the site, so they're not under their control. So what the applicant was concerned about is that we were making a requirement for them to replant the trees that there aren't under control, but they're not taking those trees out, they're simply protecting those during development. In terms of my understanding of what the committee wanted to achieve, that was to secure the landscaping for the site and initial tree screening. I'm entirely satisfied that that's a reasonable position for the council
separate condition
to take. Maybe the best way to deal with it is to have it as a condition 17 for a landscaping condition to avoid any confusion.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's have it as a separate one, and then we can have it landscaping to be agreed with us prior to. So, all those in favour of approval with the now added condition, please show your hands, and I will be voting on this one. All those against? Of course. Any abstentions? That application is approved. And I think because he's not sitting on this one, I'm assuming he's gone home because he can't sit on the next one either. So we go on to item 6B, 61 Wortley Road.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, Chair. So this application is for the redevelopment of this site at 61 Wortley Road for a pair of semi-detached properties and one detached property. Eventually I'll work out how to use the mouse and get the right way forward. It's my first time. Right, so this is the site on Wortley Road. It's currently occupied by a single-storey property and is just to the southeast of the site we've just been discussing, southwest. So this is the aerial view of the site. There's an existing bungalow on the site, and what you can see just to the north is the block of flats at Diana Court. You can see the block of flats here at Clare Court, and a more recent, I've forgotten what this site is called, but it's a McCarthy and Stone development opposite the site. Just to show you some views of the existing property, so this is stood in Wortley Road, looking at the bungalow on the site currently. Shot number 2 is looking at the side of the property across from Clare Court, and the number 3 is taken from a footpath which you can just see between the back of Diana Court and Wortley Road, which I understand is a private right-of-way between that block of flats and Wortley Road. So the survey drawings of the bungalow, very much as you would expect. This is the proposed layout, Chair. So what we've got on here is the detached property on the east end of the site, and then the pair of semis here. So all 3 properties access off Wortley Road. You've got a couple of parking spaces, tandem spaces each there. What you can see in terms of the dotted lines is the purple is the existing bungalow's footprint, which is here. The blue line's less helpful. That was a previous scheme that we was withdrawn, which we felt was overdevelopment and had unacceptable impacts. But for your reference points for looking at the photos as we go along, that's the existing footprint of the bungalow on the site, and here's the proposed dwellings. These distances here, we just tried to highlight some of the key interrelationship distances. So you've got a little kitchen window proposed to this detached unit, and that's 7 metres across this footpath, and the side elevation of number 59. And then you've got some distances from the back of the proposed semis to the nearest wall of flat 18 at Diana Court, and then this 13-metre distance to a bedroom window, which I'm going to show you in some of the photos coming in the rest of the presentation. So this is how the resulting street scene would look. You've got the chalet property here at number 59, this footpath access through here, the detached unit here, the pair of semis here, and Clare Court on the left-hand side. And there in the purple is the existing property, which is demolished for the scheme. So plans of the detached unit, fairly typical 3-bed layout. The one thing I just want to draw members' attention to is this particular design at the back, where we have this cap slide roof with the roof lights set in, which serve these roof lights here, 1, 2, 3, which serve the 2 bedrooms at the back, and the purpose of that being to limit the possibility of direct overlooking towards the properties at Diana Court to the north. These are the pair of semis, and again a similar approach being used in this design of the properties, incorporating these roof lights into the rear in an attempt to minimise or limit the impacts on the neighbouring property. And again, you can see the outline of the existing bungalow on here, so you can see the relative increase in height and bulk as a result of the development. Layout of the properties, again, as much as you would expect. For us, the nub of the issue, one of the principal issues we've been considering is the impact to the nearest property at flat 18 in Diana Court. Now, just to help members understand what these photos of showing. If we go to number 1, this is the this glazed area, so it's the main living space of that particular flat. So that's on this line here. And so when you're in that room, you're sort of looking out in that sort of aspect there. What you can see, as you can see from photo 2, is the rear existing boundary of number 61 Wortley Road, with some hedging and the bungalow behind, and then a sizable hedge which separates Diana Court from Clare Court, which is running along this line here. Now this window here is a bedroom to the property, and that would be on this line along here, so that has an aspect south looking straight at the fence. And then above that, I'll get onto the terrace above that on the next set of photos. And then number 3 is in effect set within these what would be the sort of communal gardens of the flats here. But just to draw your attention, this is a private, in effect, a private amenity space to the occupier of that particular unit. Moving on, these are more views from the nearest property affected. So up here is this sitting out terraced area for flat 18. And as you can see, that's got a very clear view of the site from that elevated position where the bungalow is at the moment, and where the new properties would go here. And behind you can see the larger bulk of the McCarthy and Stone development. And this is from inside the window that you saw earlier and looking straight towards the boundary of the site. And this is from inside, which I understand is a bedroom to flat 18, a bedroom to flat 18, and then this terraced area, which you can see on there. And just some further views of this property. This is a window this is the closest window to the proposed scheme. So it is on this line here on the southern elevation, and then has a view in effect due south towards the boundary, where there is this hedge separating from the hard surface and parking area, which is in this part of the site here. And just to show you how Diana Court extends, and that window, the bottom right, is the view from inside. So that's a secondary window to the lounge area that you see here. And then finally, just to show you this, this is the terrace of number 18, the upper terrace with its bedroom area there. Final just views in terms of trees and layout. So protected trees on the west of the site, the proposed properties in this location here. So Chair, the character of the street has a great deal of variety of development in it. We're satisfied that due to the very varying scale and nature of the properties in the particular street, that it can accommodate an intensification of the site with the pair of semis and the detached property. The principal issue for us is to have minimise the impacts on the adjoining property as part of that. So it's inevitable that as the development of the site, there's a change in a relationship and a change to the outlook of the neighbouring property. That doesn't make it automatically harmful. It's the degree of that change and the extent of that change on the neighbouring property. From our perspective, we're satisfied that the applicant has sought to minimise those impacts in terms of the privacy or any overbearing impact by its design, the use of the cat slide roofs, the insertion of the roof lights, and also by the siting and the overall heights of the properties. So we accept there is a change. We accept the neighbour to the north will be able to see the development, but in this instance, having considered all those factors, we're satisfied that the impacts overall are acceptable within the tolerances as set out in policy HE2, which asks for development to minimise its impact on residential properties and also be compatible with neighbours' living conditions. You'll see from the report that in this case we have completed the legal agreement, and so the recommendation is to approve the application subject to the conditions in the report, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have two speakers on this. We'll take the speaker against first. Ms Selwood, if you'd like to come forward, introduce yourself, and then we can start the clock.
So Carrie Selwood, I am the occupant of flat number 18, Diana Court. So I've sent in some pictures mainly from the bedroom, well, the only bedroom window that there actually is in the property. I support development and believe that, you know, that there is a housing need, but what I feel is that the ridge, if you look at my bedroom window, you can see where it currently is. The original application that was put in, the ridge line was 2 metres lower, which was withdrawn, and then this one's gone back in, which is even higher. So my main concern is basically the height of the building. Under national planning guidance, it states that there should be a 45-degree right of light, which it does pass. But the guidance also says there should be a 35-degree angle clearance to the window from the adjacent building heights, and this does not clear the 35 degrees, it only measures at 25 degrees. Sorry. So my point really being is for the roof line to come down some, and that permitted development rights for any new owners to move in would not automatically be able to put a dormer window in and look straight in my bedroom and the rest of my property. So just, yeah, so if the permitted development rights were withdrawn, that would obviously help to keep my privacy. And with the ridge height, again, it basically casts my own amenity area into shadow most of the time. If the property was at the north, it wouldn't affect as much, but this is due south. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms Selwood. We now have a speaker for the application. If you'd like to come forward, Mr Wilden. Again, if you could introduce yourself and then we'll start the clock.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dan Wilden. I'm speaking in support of this application on behalf of AJ Developments, the applicant. The Planning Officer has comprehensively explained the full details of this proposal in his opening presentation to you, and as you heard, the Officer's professional recommendation is to grant planning permission. The current proposal follows a withdrawn planning application for 4 units, as we've heard, and subsequent pre-application discussions with your Planning Officer as to what would be acceptable on the site. And as you've seen from the photographs up there, your Planning Officer has had a good chance to visit the adjacent flat inside and out, and has obviously made a good assessment of the impact on that property. And as such, he was able to suggest the use of the cat slide roof in order to bring an acceptable impact onto that property. The site lies in the established built-up area of Highcliffe within easy walking distance of all the shops and facilities. In short, it is the ideal location for new houses to be located. The application site is surrounded to the north, west and south by large flatted developments, underlining the mixed character of Whatley Road, particularly at this western end. And so, as you've noted in the officer's report, the proposal is deemed to have an appropriate physical, visual relationship to side boundaries and the street scene. And there doesn't seem to be any reasonable argument that the proposal would be out of character with the locality. So moving on to the key issue, the residential amenity of number 18 Diana Court, the flat which lies to the rear of this site. We've heard from the residents, but we've heard from your Planning Officer, who has had the chance to visit the flat and make a careful, detailed, objective assessment of the privacy, overbearing and light issues raised by the occupants of the property. It's worth pointing out again that the flat in question has been designed so that its principal outlook is not to the south towards our site, but to the west. And this is reflected in the large glass windows facing west on both floors, and the ground floor patio, which is west of those windows, and the first floor terrace which is on the western side of the large glass windows. Only secondary windows are facing towards our site, and so the impact on those is what we're looking at. The proposal has been designed, as we've heard, with the cat slide roof to minimise the impact on the adjacent property, and which we think it does successfully, and your planning officers agree. In conclusion, this is a great opportunity to provide additional high-quality family homes in a sustainable location within the urban settlement boundary, close proximity to shops, services and schools. I hope you agree with your planning officer and the team leader's recommendation to grant planning consent for this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well timed. We're going to go into questions now. I have 3. The first question I'm going to ask is, could you come back to us on the question of the degrees of clearance that were quoted earlier? I'm not sure, A, that I got them, and B, where they came from.
Yes, Chair. Just to clarify, there are no standards set down in national guidance in the NPPF about view angles from windows to maintain living conditions, and also neither are there any in our adopted policies. So we would have to treat each proposal on its merits. So there's a reason for that, and that allows us a degree of flexibility to apply residential amenity standards flexibly, and we would consider the characters of the areas very differently depending on where they were. So we don't have a standard against which we could say it fails and therefore it's contrary. What we do is have to apply the test in policy HE2, which talks about whether it's compatible, and that's a wider assessment of all of the merits of the application. So there's that one.
Thank you. The next one was, it was stated that that the windows facing the development were secondary windows. My understanding was that is the only window to that bedroom.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. My understanding is the case officer has been in the objector's property, and that is the only window, as I understand it, to that bedroom there. Yes.
And finally, would we be able to remove the permitted development rights to prevent such things as dormers being placed that would obviously face directly?
Yes, Chair, that's contained within condition 8, where you'll see that there's a reference to no further windows, dormer windows or other in the rear elevations. Just as a belt and braces, I would recommend removing the ability to do a 2-storey rear extension, which I would believe would be feasible on any of the 3 units, and I think we would want to be able to control that possibility. So I would recommend adding the removal of the ability to carry out that part of the Part 1 Class A development for a 2-storey rear extension. The single-storey rear extension should be compatible with neighbours and owners.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else for questions? Councillor Neil.
Going back over the windows, the cat's eye, whatever, would it be appropriate if it was partially obscure glazed?
I suspect because of the angle they're at, it's not going to be necessary anyway.
Chair, we could have a recommendation that the internal sill height is no lower than 1.7 metres. That's the requirement in the permitted development regulations. In effect, if you imagine then you were standing in the room, the window is at an angle, in effect your eye level is there. What you can see is sky. What you can't see is down into the neighbour's garden. So that would be a reasonable condition, Chair.
Happy with that.
Any further questions? In that case, we shall go to debate. Would anybody like to start me off? In that case, I'm actually going to propose this for approval. I'd like the additional robustness added to the clause to the condition about permitted development and also about the sill height. But other than that, I think it's probably better than what looked like a rather large application that was withdrawn previously. And I think we have to accept that there's going to be development in that area. The properties are very, very different all the way along that road, and therefore I think we should approve it. Councillor Neil.
I'm happy to second that proposition, and at least when we do this, the conditions can be added. We don't know what would happen if it went to another place.
It does mean we maintain control.
Exactly.
Councillor Spittle.
I'm pleased actually that you're recommending approval, which I was beaten actually by Councillor Neil, as I was quite willing to second, because I can appreciate the neighbours' concern, but this is actually quite a pleasing development in so much that you take into account the area and the requirements on the market as well. So, as I said, I'm quite happy with it and will be supporting it. Thank you.
Do we have any further speakers in the debate? In that case, I shall go to the vote and I will be voting on those. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That application is approved. We now go on to agenda item 7, planning appeals. No. I've got one. Just happy to note that. Any questions on that? No? In that case, I will draw this meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everybody.